Hi, I'm Sheridan Webb from the Training Designers Club, and in this short video I want to share with you 10 practical tips to help you to design your virtual training so that it runs like a dream. I'm not a technical expert and I don't want you to think for a moment that I am, and this video is not about using technical platforms. What it does do is showcase 10 really simple but important things that we in the Training Designers Club have learned as we have moved from delivering our training predominantly in a face-to-face environment to doing it almost exclusively online. So everything in this video has come through practice, through experience, and the things that we've learned, particularly in our designer drop-ins with the VIP members of the Training Designers Club. So without further ado, let's start looking at the tips.
So the first tip I would like to share with you from our group is how important it is to have one measurable outcome for your session. So being super clear on what the purpose of the training is and keeping your session focused on that. We don't have the luxury when we are doing virtual training to cover lots and lots of different topics because we don't have the time. And if we do try and cover lots of different topics, we tend not to do any of them any justice because it's such a quick trot through the various things that we want to talk about that we end up either confusing people or not adding any real value. What we've found is that it's much better to have a number of short sessions that have one very clear outcome than trying to cram too many things into one long session. That might work face to face, but it really doesn't work when we're talking virtual training. So keep it really focused and add extra sessions if you need to. The second tip is to prepare your delegates, and this is becoming even more important because chances are you're quite comfortable using the technology by now because it's something that you're using pretty much every day. Some of your delegates may be using this technology for the very first time, so we cannot assume that they know what they're doing. So it's important that we make arrangements for that. And what a lot of the VIPs have worked out it's best to do is to send them things in advance. So whether that's a written how-to guide or whether it's a video demonstrating how to log on, how to annotate a slide, how to do whatever it is you need to, how to access shared documents. People will feel a lot more prepared for the session if they know that they're going to be able to contribute. And also it makes it a lot easier for you, of course, if you're the one running the session, if you haven't got to go back to basics all the time, or you're finding that some people are struggling to find things. On a related note, it's really important that you ask people to join with a laptop or a desktop because obviously the functionality isn't there if they join on a phone or even a tablet. And if they're not used to doing online training, they may think it's perfectly acceptable to join via their phone. So do encourage them to join using the right technology and help them to use that technology. The third point is to keep it super simple. Doesn't mean to say we need to keep it boring, and I'm not talking about not having engagement and interactivity, but stick to the functionality of your platform as much as you can. You don't always need to go off platform looking for exciting ways of doing things. There's an awful lot built into something like Zoom and even Teams. If you know what you're doing, you can do quite a lot with Teams and WebEx. In fact, there is a standalone presentation similar to this one called 12 Ways to Bring Your Learning to Life without spending any money or being a technical genius. And that gives you 12 ways that you can actively engage your audience without leaving Zoom. So stick to the functionality as much as you can. It means that you're going to be able to keep flowing. You're not going to have to stop to switch platforms. You're less likely to lose people as they drop off and can't get back in. And there's less explaining to do as well. And people feel a real sense of accomplishment if they've been able to participate all the way through without getting confused by the various pieces of technology. The fourth point is to keep it active. Super important in virtual training. it's very tempting, I think, sometimes to take away the activities because we need to keep our sessions short. But then you end up with a webinar. And there's nothing wrong with a webinar. A webinar can be great, as can e-learning, but let people know that's what it is, because they will approach it in a different way. If we're doing virtual training, it is just like face-to-face training, except we're not all in the same room. So we do need to keep engaging with our delegates on a really regular basis. So whether that's just for a little acknowledgement or asking them to do something really simple, doesn't always have to be a great big activity. If you think about it, if you were training face to face, you would be constantly asking for acknowledgement from the group, or you'd be throwing out little questions just to check that people were with you. Remember that people learn when they are actively engaged. And if they're actively engaged in your session, they're not going to be replying to that email, they're not going to be scrolling through Facebook or playing with a dog or whatever else they might be doing. So keep it as active as you possibly can, and the time will just honestly fly. The fifth point is to use more visual aids. Now, I don't know about you, but when I'm running a face-to-face session, I tend not to use a great many slides. I have a few to keep me on track, and if we're showing a model or a process or something like that, a slide can be incredibly useful. Otherwise, I tend to rely a lot on flip charts and post-it notes. As I've changed to a virtual delivery, I'm finding I need to add a lot more slides. For one, it helps to provide a visual stimulus to your delegates. So we need to keep them focused on the session, and changing that stimulus on a regular basis keeps them looking at what's going on, keeps them listening. And when we're doing slides, remember, it's not about cramming it full of words. It's certainly not about putting your script up there. So the principles of good visual aids still apply. It's about keeping them visual. It's about keeping them minimalist, but we might want to put more in than we normally would. And that helps people to keep up with where we're going with the session as well. The sixth point is to underestimate what you can cover in the time available. Now, some of the VIPs who were quite early into the virtual training came back to our drop-ins and went, oh my goodness me, I couldn't cover half the things that I thought I would be able to cover, because discussions can take a little bit longer, for one thing. We don't have the over-talking that you get in a face-to-face session. But also it's that sort of social aspect that we forget how long that can take, plus the technical aspects onto that, getting people in and out of breakout rooms, getting people onto shared documents, all eats into time. So a really good tip is, let's say your session is due to start at 9:30. If this were face-to-face, you'd have people drifting into the training room from about 9:15 because they want to grab a coffee, they want to choose their seat, they want to get settled, and they'll be chatting to other people as they do that. In a virtual training session, your session starts at 9:30, and guess when they turn up? 9:30 on the dot. But they still want to have that social interaction. So you've still got the chit chat. And that can be quite frustrating if you've scheduled your session to run on quite a tight time scale. So build it in. Build in 10 minutes at the start. Don't even think about starting your training until 10 minutes later. If you get to start a little bit earlier, then that's a bonus. There's also the fact that when you put people in breakout rooms as well, unless they know people already and know each other quite well, they're going to want to introduce themselves and find out who they're working with. So you need to allow for that in your exercises. Obviously, if people know each other well already, you perhaps don't need to do that. But we really must think about the time it takes for people to settle in and get into the activity that we've asked them to do, and then to come back and check that everyone's happy before we actually start debriefing. So always underestimate what you can cover. You can always add a little more discussion if you find that you've got a little bit of time to spare. The seventh the seventh tip is to write your session notes separately. This is something I've always encouraged anyway, even with face-to-face training. Because I don't use that many slides, it really is pointless me using the notes on the slides, because I could go an hour before I flick to my next slide. And I think when we're running virtual training sessions, you can't look at your notes under your slides because you're sharing your screen. And when you've got delegates there as well, even if you've got two screens, it can start to get really cluttered. So write your session notes separately, and honestly, it's a good idea to print them off because then you can just glance down at them, you know exactly where you are, and you haven't got to worry about trying to find things on the screen. The second point is to prepare your stage directions and test them in advance. What do I mean by that? Well, chances are your facilitation skills are pretty good. You don't need instructions as to how to facilitate discussions, for example, or how to give feedback to people. But when we're focused on facilitating sessions and interacting with our delegates, it's very easy to forget the technical aspect of running the session. So things like remember to save the annotations and clear them before you move on. Things like remember to copy and paste the link to the shared document in chat. All of these things help you to manage your session more efficiently and more smoothly because they're the things that you're more likely to forget because they're the things that are new to you. If you are running quite a complicated session, it's even more important, but it can be incredibly helpful to have a colleague as a co-presenter or even just someone act as a producer who can look after all of that technical side for you so you can just focus on facilitating the session and interacting with the delegates. But certainly it's something I've found incredibly useful is to write down those stage directions, those technical reminders of what I need to do and when I need to do it. The 8th tip is similar to that. It's write out your exercise instructions. Again, when we are facilitating face-to-face, we can verbally tell everybody what we want them to do. We can see very quickly if they've understood what we want them to do, and we can course correct as we go. That's far harder in a virtual session, so we need to write out instructions, and not necessarily on slides. Slides are fine if everyone's going to be working in full group or they're going to be working individually. But the minute you start introducing breakout rooms, obviously the slide has gone. So we need to provide those instructions in a separate shareable document or something that can be put into chat that delegates can take with them so that when they're working in groups, they can refer back to the instructions and they know exactly what it is you want them to do. Again, it's a little bit more preparation that you may not be used to if you're used to facilitating sessions purely face-to-face. The 9th point is to remember it's all about people. Yes, we are delivering via a screen, but the fundamental principles of what we're doing is exactly the same. Now, one of our VIP members has taken to virtual training like a duck to water and he absolutely loves it. And he says the best thing he can share with anybody is to ask a great question and facilitate a discussion, making sure that everyone's involved, everyone has a chance to contribute, or to give people really meaty case studies that they can look at in groups and discuss in detail and then just bring it all back. Because discussion is still probably the most powerful way that we learn. So providing lots of opportunities for people to interact with each other rather than the tech is far more important than wowing them with the latest shiny fancy object. No one's going to be impressed with that. Which brings me to point number 10, which is choose your additional tools carefully. There's an awful lot of applications out there that you can use to enhance your training sessions, and they're brilliant. But some of them are overcomplicated and not all of them are necessary. The challenge should come from the content of your session, not from using the tech. As I've already talked about, when we're thinking about the competence of your delegates, if they are getting confused or getting lost or they feel that they don't know what to do, that's going to totally take away from the quality of the session that you're delivering. It's not about your competence with the technology, but your delegates. So always think about where they are and not where you are. There are additional challenges with using things like Mural or Miro or all these other things that you can do. Sometimes people have to set up an account in order to be able to use it, so that is an additional hurdle to overcome. Sometimes firewalls won't let people use them in the session. So that can really cause a problem in the session if you haven't checked that out and people are trying to access things and they can't, especially if you don't have a backup plan. So keep things as simple as possible that will do what it is you want to do. So always start with your content and what you want to get over, and then find the tool to do that, rather than thinking, oh, there's a shiny tool here, how can we use it? And just one final word on that. Some of these tools, in particular Poll Everywhere and Mentimeter, can be integrated into PowerPoint. So that makes it so much easier for you, because you haven't got to go swapping between different windows, and it can make it a lot easier for your delegates as well, because they can just keep the one thing open, and again, they're less likely to get lost. So they're just 10 tips that the VIP members of the Training Designers Club have shared in our designer drop-in sessions, as we have transitioned from facilitating everything virtually to from facilitating everything face-to-face to everything virtually. So we've come quite a long way. But it is ever evolving, and we are still learning, and the joy of being part of a supportive community is that we take each other with us. As soon as one member learns something, they share it with the rest of the members. So we're learning more quickly and we're learning with more confidence. And as I said, a lot of the members have gone from 0 to almost expert in about 4 months, which is just phenomenal. So through learning with each other, we are all sharpening our saw. Even those who perhaps don't do a lot of virtual training are feeling a lot more confident that they know what to do when the time comes. So what next? Well, if you want to learn more about designing for digital delivery, there is a program starting on the 10th of September that you can enroll on. It's 5 90-minute interactive sessions, which is a training design program with a focus on virtual delivery. So it's not about how to use Zoom, it's not about your presentation skills, it is about how to design a cracking session. So the principles are exactly the same as to whether you are designing face-to-face or virtual, but we are going to be looking at all of those principles from the virtual perspective. So, and as we go, because it's one session per week, you will be able to design yourself a virtual session that will work. So I would love to welcome you on that. You can find details of how to enroll on the Training Designers Club website. And if that's not for you, if you feel that you don't want that formal interaction, you just want a little bit of support and you really like the idea of being able to try things out and ask for advice, then please become a VIP member of the Training Designers Club. And you can do all of those things on an ad hoc basis and join our fabulous little community. Just one more note is that if you are a VIP member, you get to enroll on the Designing for Digital Delivery programme for half price, as well as get the ongoing support. So that's it for now. I'm sure there'll be more tips as we continue to learn, but I hope you found this really, really useful. And if I don't see you on the programme, I hope to see you in the VIP members group. Thank you so much for your time and take care.